Hello and welcome back to my writing vlog series. I'm still working on my novel, Nature's Culling. In this video I'm going to work on chapters 26 and 27. So those are the climax and the resolution chapters. I apologize if you can hear some noise, but it's very windy today and it's raining as well, and it doesn't seem like it's going to stop raining for a while yet, so I'm just going to record and then hope that it doesn't get picked up, that the noise doesn't get picked up too much by the microphone. Okay, so what I have in my outline for the climax chapter is the people at his house, family and friends from his and the baby's mother's side, refuse to leave. A huge verbal fight ensues. My male MC breaks down. Someone, maybe his mother, encourages him to see things from the positive side, but the male MC claims that there are no positive sides to life. That is what I have in my outline. I'm not going to write it like this because one reason is that my male main character doesn't have any parents left, so he can't have his mom encourage him, but his mom can't say anything to him, and so it needs to be someone else who encourages him to see things from the positive side. And I'm thinking that the character who has to fill this role of the person who encourages my main character to go on and to keep on trying and to see the positive things in life has to be Charlotte. So the people at his house have to be Pamela's parents. Pamela is dead, but there's a baby, and Charlotte, Timothy and the baby Hope live there as well, and Kenny has to deal with how things are, and he has to do something about things. He has to figure out what he's going to do with his life. So this huge verbal fight that ensues, I'm not quite sure how that is going to unfold. Maybe I need to make a time skip. Maybe I should start the chapter with Charlotte threatening him. If he neglects the baby, then Charlotte might have to just report it to the authorities so the authorities can take away the child from Kenny. And he doesn't want that, but he needs to get this wake-up call. So I think that this call that she threatens to make is what is going to push him and to make him take action. I'm not quite sure what the climax is going to be, but the previous chapter ended with Pamela's parents talking with Kenny and trying to convince him to do things differently and to get a hold of himself and be there for the baby. He can't do anything about the fact that Pamela is dead. He's still there, and the baby is there, and they need to figure out how to be a family even though Pamela is dead. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to write in chapter 26, but I hope that I will figure that out. And then for the resolution, I have this in my outline. At last, they finally managed to convince him that it's not all bad, and that he's still got things to live for. The baby needs him. It needs its father. He finally accepts that that's how things are. The others might be right. He has lost a lot and been through hard times, but he's still here. There are still things to live for. There's a thing about things to live for. I mentioned that twice. It just occurred to me. In the very first sentence I wrote, and that he's still got things to live for. That is what they're trying to convince him. And then they finally convince him, and then he realizes that he still has things to live for. These characters, whoever they are, have to convince him that it's the right thing to do, to move on and to be there for the baby and try to get the best out of life, even though he's not with Pamela anymore. That's what I have in my outline for the resolution chapter. So if all goes well, I'm going to wrap up the entire novel in this writing vlog. I'm hoping that everything goes according to plan, but let's see how I do when I actually get to writing this novel. I will start doing that now, and then I will get back to you. And then once I have hopefully written both of these chapters, I will tell you what I wrote and how it went. And then hopefully I will have a completed first draft of Nature's Culling. But I'll get to work on that and then I will see you in a bit. Hello again. It's about 3.5 hours later and I have now written chapters 26 and chapter 27. So that means that I have now written the first draft of Nature's Culling. The novel is complete. The first draft is complete, but I will need to read through it and make corrections. I'm considering doing a reading of my entire first draft of Nature's Culling and then turning them into YouTube videos. I don't know if that's something you would be interested in. A quick status on my novel in terms of number of words I have written. It is that I have written 4,228 words for chapter 26 and 3,395 words for chapter 27. In total today I have written 7,623 words, and my entire novel is 101,620 words. When I subtract the bits I have in my outline, the prose, or not the prose, but the outline bits that are not going to be included in this draft, I think the novel sits at just above 100,000 words. So my guess regarding the total number of words has checked out, I think. I guess that I would land at about 100k, and that's what I have done. The number of words for this novel or this first draft is probably going to change when or if I do bigger edits. I'm going to read through it and make edits, but I'm thinking that I might do a reading of the novel as it is, mistakes and all of my notes for myself. I haven't really made that many footnotes in my document for myself, but there are some things that I need to check when I do a reading of it. Regarding what I have actually written in these 2 chapters today, I can make 2 brief summaries. I won't go that much into detail with what I wrote in each chapter, but chapter 26 was the climax chapter. And in that, Kenny is distancing himself from the baby, and he still doesn't want anything to do with the baby because it just reminds him of Pamela and he doesn't really want to keep it, but he's trying. He tries to comfort the baby. He's trying to get the baby to stop crying. But then Charlotte comes into the room and he's been cursing and maybe shouting a bit, and that isn't really helpful in terms of getting the baby to calm down. So Charlotte comes up into the nursery and she helps him with the baby. She gets the baby to calm down, but she confronts him. She tells him that he either has to suck it up, he has to get himself together and try harder, or not just yell at the baby and be frustrated, and him lashing out at people isn't doing anyone any good. So he has been there before, but with Timothy, and that was after Kenny lost Penny, I believe. Maybe it was after he lost Pamela. Oh, I don't think so. He went to see a psychologist after he lost Penny, and so Pamela and Charlotte convinced him to go and see the psychologist after Penny died, and he did that. That is a lot earlier in the story. Charlotte is very adamant. She's very determined to get him to make a decision. So he either needs to get himself together or he needs to give the baby away. If he doesn't adopt it and if he doesn't get himself together, then she will be forced to call, I have already forgotten what term it is or what name it is, but there's this agency, or not agency, but there's a service, childcare service or whatever it's called, that you can call if you know of a child that is being neglected. So she threatens him with calling, and then he says something like, I don't care, just take him away, just do something about it, I don't want to have anything to do with that baby. And he keeps calling the baby it instead of him. But he actually slips up, he calls the baby him. at one point, and Charlotte says that that's an improvement. At least he has tried to be there for the baby and do what he can, but he gets frustrated when he can't get the baby to stop crying. So he goes like, I'm not cut out to be a father, and I'm not meant to be a dad on my own. Pamela should have been here, and it should have been her baby first and foremost, and I would have helped her with the baby. I'm not meant to do this on my own. And he goes on like that. But Charlotte finally gets him to say that, okay, he will call an adoption agency. I don't really know how adoption works in the US, but I get around that by having Charlotte say that she doesn't know how it works, and maybe it doesn't work the way that she thinks it does, but he needs to call someone and he needs to set things in motion, because it isn't the baby's fault, and the baby deserves to be in a family where it will be loved. So finally, Kenny gives in and he's going to call an adoption agency, and then I have a chapter break. And then the second part of chapter 26, this climax chapter, is when this adoption agency person, there's an employee who comes to the ranch to have Kenny sign some papers and take the baby with her. So it's a woman. I named her Brittany Crimson. Crimson, this last name is from a game I have been playing recently. I couldn't think of a better name, so I just gave her a name that's the name of a city in The Evil Within. I will probably change her name to something else, but for now it's just what it is. This Brittany person comes to the ranch and she wants Kenny to sign these papers. And then when he's actually going to sign the papers, I indicate that he's not really sure that it's what he wants, but he's going to do it. But then Timothy comes into the room and he asks, who is this lady? What's going on? And then it's revealed to the boy that Kenny is going to give this child away for adoption. And Timothy says something like, no, don't do it. He's like my brother. Let him stay here. Don't let the lady take him away. And then because Timothy insists that Kenny takes a good look at his son, Kenny actually does that. He can't help but look at his son, and then the baby happens to smile. So the baby is 2 months old. I had to look up when babies actually start smiling, real smiles, and that's about 2 months, I think. So the baby has just learned how to smile. So he sees that, Kenny sees this smile, and he's reminded of Pamela, but once he doesn't get sad that she's gone, but he's sad that he's actually thinking about giving this child away, and it's the last thing he has of her. He didn't get to have a child with Penny, but he has gotten over that now, but now he has a child that he needs to take care of, and he changes his mind, and so he's not going to sign the papers anyway. This lady is a bit confused because at first she thinks that Timothy is Kenny's son, but Kenny clears that up and says that it's a brother of my friend. And the woman is a bit confused because she thought that there might be more kids at this ranch. But Kenny assures her that there's only this kid. She hasn't seen Hope. Hope is still just a baby. She's a bit older than his own son. But Kenny just tells this lady that there's this boy and that there's this baby, and he doesn't want her to take the baby away anyway. So the boy is glad, and Charlotte is glad too when she comes into this room that they're in and then hears the news that the baby is going to stay with them. And she's glad for that because it shows that Kenny has evolved and he's going to take responsibility. Okay, so that's what happens broadly, at least in chapter 26. And then in chapter 27, I have a time skip. I don't mention it right away, but I indicate during the start of the chapter that it's a year later, or almost a year later. It has to be about 10 months later because the boy, or the baby son, was 2 months when this woman came to take him away, and then Kenny changed his mind. And now 10 months have passed, and then it's his son's first birthday. His birthday is also Pamela's dying day. And the chapter opens with Kenny and Timothy playing catch. They're throwing a ball back and forth, and the two babies are cheering and whooping and clapping, and they don't really understand that much, I think, but they're there. Hope is a bit older, but his own son is outside as well in a baby chair or something. And Charlotte is watching the kids while Kenny throws this ball with Timothy. So they're chilling, they're taking some time off from working at the ranch, and they're basically just waiting for Pamela's parents to come to their birthday party that they're throwing for Bernie. So I named Kenny's son, his 1-year-old son, after Pamela's dad. So he basically named his son after the son's granddad on Pamela's side. So I mentioned in the chapter that maybe it helped soften things up between him and his father-in-law, that he named his son after him. So there's Bernard, that's Pamela's dad, and then his son is named Bernard as well, but for the sake of not mixing up those two names, I called him Bernie. So Bernie and Bernard. In the previous chapter, I have Charlotte and Timothy refer to the baby as Kenny Jr. And Kenny resists that. He doesn't like that, and he doesn't want to be reminded that it's his son. So he says, don't call him Kenny Jr. Don't call him anything at all. I don't want to name the baby because I'm giving the baby away. He changed his mind about that though, and he finally decides on a name for the baby, as we hear in this last chapter, the resolution chapter. Kenny, Charlotte, Timothy, and the two babies are just outside chilling and waiting for Pamela's parents to come over, and they come for a visit. I tell some of that because I wanted to get moving in the story quickly instead of having to describe everything that happens at the party. So I kind of just sum up the most important events at that party, and then when Pamela's parents have left the ranch again, I have Kenny and Charlotte tuck in their babies. They have to prepare the kids so that they can put them to bed, and then they do that. And then I have a show part of this chapter where Kenny and Charlotte talk after they have tucked in their kids. And Kenny had an important talk with Charlotte earlier, and he revealed that he has fallen in love with her. That was quite important, but I didn't mention that before. But he talked with her while his brother Timothy is playing with the ball. He's doing some tricks on his own with the ball, and then Kenny and Charlotte are just talking. But at that conversation, he revealed to her that he has got feelings for her, and she can't really accept it because she's thinking that he's just considering her because he's settling. He just wants to love someone, and then it's easy because she's there. And Charlotte's reply is that I don't think you really love me. I think you're just throwing your love onto me because you don't know who else to love, and you're still mourning Pamela and maybe also Penelope, but that's a different matter. But because it's Bernie's birthday, it's also Pamela's dying day, and Charlotte doesn't believe Kenny. She believes that it's just something he says because he's caught up in grief still, and he's reminded of the love he lost, and then she does not want to be someone he just settles with. She doesn't want to be a consolation prize. I have her say that directly, and he tries to assure her that she wouldn't be a consolation prize, but she doesn't believe it. She tells him, it's not the right time. You're mourning, and it's Pamela's dying day, and I don't believe you. It's just not the right time. That was the party that I skipped over more or less, but they meet each other in the hallway after they have tucked in their kids. I think that Charlotte's bedroom is on the downstairs level. I mentioned directly in this chapter that they're actually living under the same roof. So they don't really have enough bedrooms in that house, and they have hired a new employee, and he lives over in that secondary house. It's not really important, I just briefly mentioned that, but I make it clear that Charlotte, Timothy, Hope, Kenny, and his son are all living in the same house. So it's getting a bit crowded, and he's thinking about making home improvements. He wants to add another room or something. He wants to add another bedroom to his house because Charlotte's daughter Hope is going to want to have her own bedroom at some point. But they talk, and then Charlotte goes like, "Oh, look at the time. It's past midnight now. It's no longer Bernie's birthday." And then Kenny knows what that means. So it's no longer his late wife's dying day either. And so, okay, if he still feels the same way about her, then maybe they can be together, and then they declare their love toward each other once more. And then finally, she's ready to be with him. If he really wants her, then she wants him too. And then they kiss, and then he has some inner monologue. I go into his head and read his thoughts, and he's thinking about a lot of things, but the chapter ends with him thinking that as long as they're together, then they can do anything. They can handle everything. And then she grabs him gently by the hand and then leads him down the hallway toward his bedroom. And then I strongly indicate that they're going to make love. And Kenny is happy about that, but that is not the most important thing to him. It would be nice for him if he can have love and lust and everything else that comes with being with someone, but it's not that important. He wants to have it all, and he believes that he can have that with Charlotte. I wanted to make it clear that the story ends on a positive note. Originally, well, not originally because I strayed from my outline, but what I had in mind before I started writing this chapter was that it would just end with them holding hands together, and then that being an indicator that they were going to be together at some point. But I took that farther. They're holding hands while they talk before Pamela's parents come to the birthday party, but she retracts, she pulls back and says it's not the right time. So she didn't take that long to mature. She wanted to give him a bit of space, and if he still felt the same way after Pamela's dying day was over, then it would be fine. I think a lot of that is psychological. So just because you wait a few hours and then it's the next day, it doesn't change that much. But psychologically, I believe it could change a lot of things in that way. The story ends on a positive note, as I said. The very last sentences of this chapter and of the story at large are about his thoughts and feelings, and it's about him having changed as a result of his journey. So I like that. I believe it's an important part of any story that the hero, in other words, the MC, is going to change in some way because of everything that has happened to that character. And I hope that I have managed to actually show that he has changed and not just state that he has. Maybe he isn't that different than when his story starts, but I hope he has changed enough for it to be believable and in order for the story to make an impact on the reader. That's basically it. That was my entire novel in summary form. So I hope that you think it was interesting to hear my plans about each chapter from my original outline and then my adjusted plans for before I started writing each chapter, and then me following up on what I actually wrote in each chapter. So I hope that was interesting to you. That's it for this part of this writing vlog series. I'm planning on doing a read through of the novel where I read each chapter aloud, but I don't know what I'm going to do exactly. Maybe I will change my mind and switch to a different project and then let this project rest for a while, but I'll see what I'm going to do. Well, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this writing vlog, and I hope you will watch the next one. Until then, take care. Thank you for watching.